everybody. Hi there, thrill seekers. It's me and Ziggy. Ziggy, look at the camera. There he is. Okay, there's looking at the camera. All right. And, and the tree, still in bloom there. Can you see it? Yeah, nice tree. All right. Well, today, what you just saw in the beginning of the video was a little snippet of a song called Iron Butterfly Theme by, of course, Iron Butterfly. That's who originally did it. I'm playing all the instruments on that. The drums are machine generated. But I'm looking into getting a drum set so that I can actually start having real drums. You can't really tell the difference these days. So the drum machine technology has really progressed. When I first started doing little demos at home, the drum machine I had was one of those things that went which is really hip these days to use. But now you get drum machines that sound exactly like real drums. Anyway, so that's neither here nor there. And I also play the organ part, but I had to play the solo bar by bar. I couldn't quite get that solo down, and I still didn't do the ending right. So if any keyboard player wants to come and overdub a better solo, or one that's more like Iron Butterfly, just write me an email, and we'll put your organ solo on there instead. Oh, and another thing I wanted to talk about before I got to the meat of this. I just found out there's a couple of new books by Nishijima Roshi, by my teacher, that are available on Amazon. I had no idea. Nobody told me. So I just ordered them, and I got them yesterday. I haven't really looked at them that closely, so I'll do a review later. But this one's called A Talk on Pursuing the Truth. It's his lectures on Bendowa, which is one of the most famous essays by Dogen. I called it Dogen's FAQ in my book, Don't Be a Jerk. And then this one I'd actually heard about, but I didn't know it was already available. It's the Spanish version of Shinji Shobo Genzo. My wife speaks and reads Spanish, so I don't know. I just thought I'd get it to have it on hand in case it becomes useful one of these days, and because I'm kind of a completist when it comes to getting stuff by my teacher. But yeah, it's out in Spanish now, so anybody wants to read it in Spanish, there it is. Okay, so what did I want to talk about today? Well, it's the thing that I had planned to talk about on the last talk, but then I got sidetracked. And it's this little quote. It's another quote from Zazen Yojinki. And as I said last time, my kanji writing is legible, but not correct. I didn't learn the stroke order right, or I should have bothered more with stroke order. Anybody who knows Japanese knows what I'm talking about, and if you don't, whatever, doesn't matter. There's a certain way you're supposed to write. It's not just that you have to match the shape. You have to do the lines in the correct order, and Japanese people can tell if you've done them in the incorrect order. Truly. Okay, so this is another section of Zazen Yojinki, points to keep in mind when practicing Zazen by Keizan. Keizan, as we talked about, was the 4th generation descendant of Dogen. So he was born after Dogen died, but he would have studied with people who had actually studied with Dogen. So he was pretty close to the time of Dogen, because Dogen died when he was pretty young. So anyway, this line, which I mentioned before when I talked about this piece, I thought it was something that might be worth a whole video. And the line is, "Though you should not begrudge anyone the Dharma, do not preach it unless you are asked. Even if someone asks, keep silent 3 times. If the person still asks you from his or her heart, then teach him or her. Out of 10 times you may desire to speak, remain silent for 9, as if mold were growing around your mouth." Ugh. Nice image there, Keizan. So that's what I wanted to talk about, and it's the Zen. Ziggy always pees on camera. Isn't that nice? Isn't that lovely? Anyway, he's peeing a lot. Anyway, the reason I wanted to talk about this passage is because it is a good way to sort of encompass the attitude of Zen Buddhism to the idea of proselytizing, to the idea of spreading the message. Now, if you look it up in a Dictionary of World Religions or one of these kind of Introduction to World Religions courses they give in colleges and whatever, they'll often classify Buddhism as a missionary religion. And that means it's a religion that wants new members. Which would be in contrast to non-missionary religions. The main one I know of that's not considered which is not considered a missionary religion is Judaism. So Judaism you supposedly have to be born into. I know you can convert to Judaism, but it's kind of, it's iffy. I know some Jewish people who don't really think of converted Jews as real Jews, and there's a lot of controversy about that. But I think certain forms of Hinduism are also non-missionary, but it depends, because the Hare Krishnas are definitely a missionary form of Hinduism, and they are a legit form of Hinduism. They're not just some weird, crazy cult. They're actually a legitimate form of Hinduism that exists in India too. Anyway, Buddhism is considered to be a missionary religion. Means it wants to get new members. Now, different sects of Buddhism have different ideas about how this should be conducted. For example, and I mentioned this earlier in another video, when I was living in Chicago, this would be the late 80s, I think, and I worked at a Woolworth's in Chicago, on the north side of Chicago. I was walking home one day from my job at Woolworths, and I was confronted on the street by some Nichiren Buddhists of the Soka Gakkai school of Buddhism, which is the school of Buddhism that Tina Turner was involved with. And as people pointed out rightly in the comments section, Tina Turner later, after she'd first been a member of Soka Gakkai, she distanced herself from Soka Gakkai, but remained doing their practice, but wasn't really in favor of the organization. Anyhow, I was confronted on the street by these Soka Gakkai people who wanted to share with me the good news of Buddhism, which I thought was really comical. And at the time, I just played it off like, oh yeah, I gotta go, I'm not, because I didn't want to get into a conversation with him. But later on, I thought, oh man, I should have said to him something like, just because a guy gets hit on the head with a staff containing the Lotus Sutra doesn't mean he's Maitreya, and then walked off, just to blow their minds. Because that's the story of how Nichiren decided he was Maitreya, the second coming of Buddha, because he got knocked on the head with a staff that had a rolled up Lotus Sutra in it. There you go, you learned something from this. So there are sort of Buddhist missionaries. I don't know if Soka Gakkai does this anymore, but there was a period when they were being sort of almost like Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons, where they'd knock on your door and try to share the good news of Buddhism. I don't think they're doing that anymore. Ziggy says they are. I don't know. What do you see back there? Anyway, Zen Buddhists aren't like that. Zen Buddhists have this idea that, you should not begrudge the Dharma, you shouldn't withhold the Dharma, but you don't actually want to go out and sell it. And like they say, the rule of thumb is if somebody asks you about Buddhism, make them ask 3 times, and if they're really sincere, by the 3rd time you'll know whether they're sincere or not, and then you can share it with them. There's also this, even though Buddhist temples or Buddhist monasteries in Asia are sort of open to anyone who wants to join, but it's hard as hell to actually join. So it kind of reminds me of Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa had this policy of he would let anybody audition for his band, but you had to be really good to get in, and he wasn't going to pull any punches if you showed up and you weren't very good. That's kind of the attitude that monasteries in Asia have traditionally held, Zen monasteries. You're welcome to try to come in, but we're going to make sure there's like a hazing process involved. We're going to make sure that the people who come in are really sincere and committed to the practice and really, really mean it, because they don't want any time wasters or people just kind of lollygagging around and trying to go there just to have a free lunch or something like that. They want people who are serious and committed. So there's like a process to go through. So my take on all of this is, I'll just tell you how it works in my personal life. I'm not that famous. There are people who watch me on YouTube, and there are people who buy my books, and when I go to places where Zen folks hang out, I get recognized. But I don't get recognized on the street very much. It's happened a handful of times that people have actually come up to me on the street and recognize me. So people generally don't know that I'm a Buddhist. So occasionally I will be at a family gathering with somebody's spouse or a distant cousin or something, and they'll start talking to me about their Buddhism. And if they don't know that I am a Buddhist author and monk and everything else, I don't tell them. And I usually kind of nod and be like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Haha, Buddhism must be fun. Sounds good. And have you tried the cheese dip? I think there's some more over there. I try to get out of the conversation because because I don't want to get involved in some weird conversation about somebody's weird ideas about Buddhism, or embarrass them by saying, oh yeah, as a matter of fact, I've written 10 books about Buddhism. And I remember other instances, like when I was working at Tsuburaya Productions, people knew, it was sort of known among the company that I was interested in Buddhism and going to these retreats and things, because I'd take time off from work to do it and stuff. So I remember one time my boss at Sushi asked me something about reincarnation, and I could just feel that at that moment he was just kind of making small talk, and I didn't want to make small talk, so I just kind of was like, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I kind of just played it off as like, oh yeah, reincarnation's interesting or whatever. I don't know what I said, but I thought, this isn't. Other people, I think, in other religions would probably use that as an opening to try to convert the person or to see what they could get. But I don't do that. As far as my professional work, though, the way I look at it, at what I do, writing these books that I write and doing these videos that you're watching right now, I look at it this way, as making it available. I assume that anybody who clicked on and got this far into a video, I think I'm at about 14 minutes into this video, anybody who got this far into a video is sincere, is looking at it because they have a genuine interest. So I'm not out there trying to convert you. Books, you have to pay for. You're not supposed to steal them, so don't steal my books. So by paying for the book, you're showing that you have an interest in the book, and by making the effort to read it. So that's a person who, in my estimation, qualifies as the asking 3 times. It's sort of the equivalent of asking 3 times. Is you're expressing sincerity. It's not literally. You don't have to take that literally. Like they literally have to ask 3 times. So that's the way I take it. It was a point of contention when I was running a Zen center in Los Angeles, because to keep the center running, you had to get a certain number of people there every week, and then you had to get them to donate and stuff. And I was always uncomfortable about that, and I always said, let's do our advertising or whatever we need to do in the spirit of we're letting people know that we are here. In case they're interested in this sort of thing, we're going to let them know that we're here. But we're not trying to push it on them, and we're not trying to retain membership or anything like that, or grow. And I found that the people who I left in charge of the center, even though they told me they understood that, they didn't understand that. It especially came to a head when I was expressing things on this blog and stuff that they thought were going to turn on the vlog. I mean, on the blog too. That they thought were going to turn away members, and then they were starting to tell me what I should and shouldn't say. And I thought, no, this is not the way we do this. And Nishijima Roshi was also very adamant about that. He didn't think his students should be running Zen centers, because he thought, well, that's the way you're going to get into this trap. And he was right. You get into the trap of, you got to get butts in seats, and you got to start recruiting, and it no longer becomes about teaching sincere people who are really motivated and want to learn, but it becomes about like attracting the public, which is, I think, a lot of what is wrong with American Zen, is that there is way too much community outreach. And I don't mean that it's a bad thing to go out there and try to meet the community and to make friends with them and everything, but they're out there trying to recruit. They're out there trying to bring people in, and that necessarily involves compromising the teaching and making it more commercial and making it more palatable and sweetening it up and dumbing it down and all that stuff. And this, I think, leads to a lot of what I see as the problems with American Zen these days, is because it's become, because they're running it as a business. And I understand, that's how you got to run it if you want to run it as a business, but I don't think it should be run as a business, and I don't want to run mine as a business. So there's that. So that's my take on this thing. I think making it available is fine. And if you are a person who's interested in Buddhism, obviously you are, because you're watching this video, you don't have to make it exactly 3 times that somebody has to ask you before you tell them about it. But, I would generally advise not saying too much until you find out whether the person is really sincere. If they really, really want to know, then go ahead. Tell them the whole thing. That's great. But if they're just making chit chat, or if you feel this kind of need to bring people in, see, that's a problem, because I think that shows a lack of conviction yourself. Because one of the ways humans work is that we're more likely to believe something if a lot of people believe it. This is why over the last 3 years there was a lot of effort by the government to manufacture the illusion of consensus. So this illusion of consensus was supposed to pull everybody into believing the same thing, and that's what religions often do. It's like you don't feel quite convinced by your belief in your Lord and Savior, whoever it happens to be, the flying spaghetti monster or whoever, and so you got to get other people to believe in the flying spaghetti monster. And if enough people believe in the flying spaghetti monster, that kind of feeds back on the person who started it and was, oh wow, look at all these people, they believe in the flying spaghetti monster too, that must make it true. It's subconscious. It doesn't really, it's not something you sit there and ponder, but that's part of what goes into it. And I think the people who originated this form of Buddhism were wise to try to avoid that sort of thing. So there's what I want to say. A couple of things. Shozan Jack Haubner, my friend Shozan Jack Haubner, he's been making some really good videos these days, so go look him up on YouTube. His latest one, I think it's called This Wild and Precious Life. That one is really good. So he's worth looking at. I wanted to mention that. Oh yeah, the other thing is I'm working on a new book, and one of the things I'm doing is taking these videos and trying to turn them into chapters. So I get the transcript of the video, and then I rewrite the whole thing as a chapter of the book. So I don't know which of my videos are the good ones. If you want to comment below or send me an email to bw@hardcorezen.info to tell me which videos that you thought were particularly good, maybe I can work on those and make those into chapters of my forthcoming book. So there you go. There's your chance to participate in the creation of my next book. Okay, if you want to participate in the creation of my next meal, Isn't that good? That was pretty good. You can go to the URL that you're seeing below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my usually only ways of making a living, and I appreciate your support. But as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. All right, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. What kind of bird is that, Ziggy? You looking at a bird back there? Oh, you gonna go get it? Yeah, go see what it is. What is that? What is that back there? What is that? Yeah, I don't know. Something's up there in the tree.